What's your favorite kind of horror film? One that makes you jump? One that makes you afraid of a dark corner in your room for a night or two? Perhaps one that deeply disturbs you, implanting graphic images and terrifying thoughts right into a folder in your brain titled Never Forget. If the last example is your cup of tea, then you should check out the Belgian black comedy/horror film Man Bites Dog. But watch it at your own risk. It got an NC-17 rating for violence, which is also how you know I'm not uploading the whole film to YouTube. Now, I'm not usually scared by horror movies, let alone disturbed. Often I just think about how the filmmakers made the blood or gore effects, or I appreciate the costume design of the monsters. There's a barrier between me and most horror movies where I understand that it's all just a movie. Man Bites Dog breaks down those barriers. I had to take breaks when watching it, even the second time, because I was too disturbed. It all felt just too real to me, and I was left unsettled all week after watching it. For one, it's shot as a documentary in the style of someone like the Maysles brothers. I've heard some people toss around the word found footage when describing this film, but I don't think it's entirely accurate. The found footage genre consists of faked home movies shot on consumer-level cameras, typically. Man Bites Dog is shot on 60mm black and white film and features a documentary crew as its cast. There are also interviews with some of the main characters, spliced between scenes in the field. The more accurate term for this film would be mockumentary, which means that it occupies the same genre as The Office, but I don't think it occupies the same target demographic. The documentary style of the film tricks our brain into thinking what we're seeing is real, even if it's all scripted. But the real genius is the progression of the film. At first, the subject of the mockumentary, Ben, played by Benoit Poulvord, is a charismatic and affable serial killer. He has a pattern and a perverted code of honor. He starts each month by killing a postman in order to steal his uniform. He then uses the postman disguise to scout homes. He preys on the elderly, as they usually have money. Adding to the predictable pattern is that Benoit is a charming figure. He rants about architecture. He makes plenty of off-color jokes, and his family loves him. Side note, for the scenes in which they interview Ben's family, they actually interviewed Benoit's real family, but didn't tell them that they were making a movie about a serial killer, which rightfully shocked his whole family when they saw the finished product. There's also a distance in the first part of the film. It's shot like an intimate documentary. However, as the film goes along, the distance between viewer and subject shrinks, and as the distance shrinks, Ben's malevolence grows. How does the distance shrink, you ask? Well, the documentary crew starts helping Ben with the murders. At first, it's with small things, but their involvement grows to the point where he refers to them as colleagues. It's not like they're shooting people, though. No, that wouldn't shock you. The first time we see them help him murder, they're holding down a child whom Ben smothers. That's not even the worst thing they do. I don't think YouTube will even let me say what the worst thing they do is. You're going to have to watch the movie yourself to find out, but don't say I didn't warn you. The third and final component to the shock factor of this film is the humor. You heard me right? It's a hilarious movie, until it stops being funny. Ben is a genial guy, usually, but we've covered that. There are plenty of meta jokes scattered throughout the film, like a scene where an assassin tries to kill Ben, and they find out that the assassin had his own small documentary crew following him. There are other uses of meta humor, such as when they're looking for Ben's first communion bracelet, and the sound guy walks away from Ben, so that we hear Ben as being far away, even though he's shot in a close-up. The filmmakers also use editing to convey visually dark jokes. There are running gags in the film, like the sound men keep dying, and Remy records the exact same testimonial for all of them. The last joke plays out as an inverse to how the movie progresses. The first time the sound man dies and we hear the testimonial, it's devastating. But on the second time, it's funny. Perhaps this is an inverse to how the film progresses, but I think it's also a statement on how we, the audience, are being desensitized to what's on screen. What the filmmakers achieve with the mix of all these ingredients is a creation of a somewhat sympathetic cast of characters with whom the audience roots for, only to flip the tables on the audience. You laugh with Ben during the first act, but during the truly heinous crimes of the later acts, you feel responsible for the violence. Since the filmmakers destroy the barrier and participate in the acts of violence, it makes you, the viewer, feel like you are the one committing these atrocities. It's something I haven't seen another film successfully achieve. The film builds a tension that you can cut with a knife. It's essentially a series of scenes that start off as normal and jovial before descending into the deep depths of darkness. Ben becomes more and more unpredictable. Everyone watches him with fear, not knowing if one small phrase or action will set him off on a violent rage. There are lighter moments later in the film, but they're tampered down by what you've seen before these scenes. The film constantly recontextualizes Ben. You feel yourself nervously laughing at his jokes later in the film, not because they're funny or in good taste, but because you're afraid that if you don't, the consequences will be dire. What's funny is that the filmmaker stated that the reason they made this film was because it was something they could do on a low budget, or no budget at all. They had made a short film before this called Pas de Siffort pour Daniel, which taught them some of the ropes of filmmaking, but also inspired them to make a feature-length film. Like Christopher Nolan's Following, watch my video on that if you haven't already, they shot it in black and white 16mm. The three directors/writers/producers, Rémi Bévot, André Bonzel, and Benoît Pouvod, funded the film themselves, often taking breaks in filming because they couldn't afford film stock. The documentary style allowed them to get away with a plethora of technical errors, as the errors only raise the authenticity. Also, the documentary style allowed the crew to be the cast. I can tell you from experience that one of the hardest parts of indie filmmaking is casting. These three guys were just film students, so they didn't have much to make a movie, but somehow they made something great. It's honestly one of the best, if not the best, student film ever made. And what's more is that they broke one of Christopher Nolan's rules of no-budget filmmaking. They had guns. I don't know how they pulled off such great gun effects. My guess is that they used real blanks, or they did the Robert Rodriguez trick of putting firecrackers in the barrels. The film opened in Cannes to great reviews and, of course, controversy. It got banned in several countries, including Sweden and Ireland. Don't worry, I'm sure that if you live in those countries, you can still find it. Just use a promo code from a YouTuber who shills a VPN. Thanks to the film, Benoît Pouvod went on to a successful acting career in French cinema. The same can't be said of the other directors. Bonzel would work as a cinematographer on a handful of films over the next couple decades, but Belvaux would drop out of film directing entirely to work in advertising. Belvaux tragically committed suicide on September 4th, 2006. In the wake of his death, his family stated, "He leaves us one masterpiece and tons of regrets." I wish I could end this video on a happier note, but there just isn't one for this film. It was a great work of art that is even more relevant today than in 1992, with the influx of all these serial killer documentaries and this newfound popular fascination with these famous psychopaths. I wish Remy was still around to make another film. I'm sure he would know exactly how to lampoon everything right now in his own dark and twisted way. But having just one film from him will have to be enough.